Hi, I'm Tori Hagaman and welcome to my channel. I'm doing something a little different with this video. I normally start with a blank canvas or I show you the finished painting. But this painting is about halfway through. I've just finished the block-in stage and I thought you might be interested in seeing what does a painting look like in the middle. Well, this is a great example of it. I really want to be a loose, impressionistic artist. That's not my natural bent. So I've really been trying with this painting to do specific things to keep it super loose. I'm using big brushes, big brush strokes. I'd love to show you how I got a reference photo, how I got the drawing in, some big decisions that I made about this, some mistakes that I made. I like to leave my mistakes in so that you can learn from them. I show you how I correct them. I've also got some videos linked in the description box below where I go into more detail on things like the mother color. I use cerulean blue as the mother color in this painting. If you'd like to learn more about that, click on that link. My most popular video that I've ever put out is called The #1 Mistake That Artists Make When Putting in Clouds and Skies. And it talks about getting your clouds in at the right linear perspective, which sounds so complicated, but it's really very easy. But you'll notice what you're seeing here are the bottom shadows of the clouds. I'm getting ready to put the tops of the clouds in, but you'll notice that they're on these very distinct lines. I did that very purposefully, so when this painting is finished, it's going to look like these clouds are coming forward. The perspective of it is going to be fabulous because I did that method. I'll put a link to that video in the description box as well. I also love that while there's this real strong foreground, we also have this beautiful background that's just layer upon layer of trees and mountains getting bluer and lighter until they just disappear. I love the distance perspective in this. So if you'd like to see how I got this drawing in, how I selected the photo, big decisions that I made, I would love to let you see how I got it to this point, and then your guess is as good as mine where this is going to end up, but I would love to finish this painting with you and let you see how I bring it to completion. So if you're interested, I hope you'll stay tuned. Many of my paintings have come from reference photos from Paint My Photo. It's a free website for artists. But lately I've been really intrigued with Pixabay.com, another free resource, but it seems to be occupied by more professional photographers. I love how you can get collections of different things as you can on the other website, but the photographs seem to be more of a photographer grade, and the compositions overall seem to be better. So that's where I found this reference photo. One of the things that attracted me to this photo was that I see a Z in the composition. If you see that red line, I'd never heard of a Z. I heard an artist describe it a number of years ago, and it's become a favorite design element to me. It really makes a difference. It just kind of leads your eye back through the painting. The second thing that I really loved about this was all the different layers of depth in this one photograph. I have found one of the most important things to keep my paintings from looking flat and boring is to select reference photos with lots of layers to them. Since you have so much activity, you've got that front field and road at the front and the front trees, but then you've got that beautiful middle field. But then you've got the first mountain and the second mountain and the far mountains and the clouds that are up close and the clouds that are more in the distance. It's just going to give your painting beautiful dimension and depth and more interest. So I encourage you to look for photographs with lots of layers. So this is actually a terrible painting that I did many years ago that had been living in my basement, and I just gessoed over it. I didn't do a very good job with the gessoing. But I'm just looking at my reference photo. I've got a pencil. I've always drawn in pencil. Some people prefer to draw in paint, but I'm just trying to look at in relation to other things. I'm not the best drawer in the world, but these shapes are so general and large as long as they sort of relate to each other. I do encourage you to never put the horizon in the middle of the canvas. You either want to have a big sky with smaller landscape or the other way around. So in this painting, even though the sky is going to be dramatic, the landscape will take up more square footage. I'm picking up this, it looks like a piece of molding. It's actually the valance off of a wooden blind that I had thrown out, and I kept that valance. And you could also use a yardstick or a ruler if you're using a smaller painting. But what I'm doing is putting in the right linear perspective for those clouds. I have a complete video on how to do this, how to think about this. It's very simple to do. It's not that complicated. I'm going to put a link in the description box below, and it's called, I believe, the #1 mistake artists make when putting in skies and clouds. And I'll go into more detail explaining how I put these lines in. But these lines are going to serve as a roadmap for me to make sure that those clouds are reading correctly. You want it to look like the clouds are coming from the back of the painting, they're coming forward, and they're coming up over your head. So these lines just help me to kind of stay on track. So I encourage you to check out that video if you haven't seen it before. I've gone over my pencil drawing with some burnt sienna just so you can see the painting a little easier, and I can see it easier also. I'm using really big flat brushes for this painting. I encourage you, if you want to paint loosely, the bigger the brushes you use, the fewer the strokes, the more beautiful the brushwork, and it'll keep you from dabbing and messing with your painting too much. I typically photograph my palette at the beginning of a video and write out for you the colors I'm using. I don't know why I didn't do it on this one, but I am basically using cerulean blue as the mother color. The mother color is when you use one color over and over in a painting. You're mixing it with other colors, and it just gives you this beautiful color harmony. I'm going to put a link in the description box below of a free YouTube video that I have just about mother color, and I'll really go through a good explanation. I'll show you a landscape painting and how I used it in the sky and in the land. Cerulean blue, I normally use ultramarine blue or cobalt, and the few times I've used cerulean, I just absolutely love it. And then I think, well, why haven't I been using this all along? So that was my response with this painting as well. It's a beautiful color to paint with. As I'm coming forward, I'm using in that middle range mountain, I was adding a little Naples yellow, which is a nice earthy toned down kind of yellow, to that cerulean blue. And as I'm coming forward, it's getting a little stronger, less white in that blue. And then as I go back with the mountains, that yellow will drop out completely. I'll be adding more and more white, and just until those mountains absolutely fade away. So again, I'm using big strokes. I'm just getting in. This is what I call the block-in stage. I'm just trying to get the canvas covered with color at this point, and then I'll go back and do a second coat and fine-tune everything. As I'm coming forward, those big shrubs on the left, and I'm getting into more greens, I'm using the cerulean blue, but mixed with sap green, mixed with an olive green, using the cerulean mix with yellows to make greens. I'm just using that mother color again, mixing it in with the foreground. So I wanted to get back and let you see it head on. And see how lovely having that dark front corner is going to be with that hedge. I do think once we get the sky in, I think these colors are going to be beautiful. They're definitely going to take a second coat. And I could even go over the second coat with oils, but one thing about a painting this large, it takes a huge amount of paint. So I have so much acrylic paint, drawers of it. I'm kind of glad I'm doing this in acrylic first. So we'll see. Let's get the block in, and then we'll see where we are. So I've decided I'm going to work on the sky a little bit. Again, I just want to make sure I'm happy with the color harmony and what's happening. So for the sky itself, I'm using a little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of my cerulean and white, and I've made this pile. A fair amount of white in there. For the darker shadows, this is ultramarine blue, a little burnt sienna and white. There's more ultramarine than burnt sienna. I had it about half and half and it was just too warm. And then I am not going to overthink this. I'm just going to look at my shadows in my photograph, and I'm taking a lot of paint on a big brush, and I'm just going to lay those in. If I don't like the shape, I can always change it later. But I'm just being mindful of where these lines are. So even though I don't have a line right here, I know that that's still the right angle. And I'm really, you know, I'm not going to just paint dark on each one of these lines, but I'm going to make sure that the general shape of the clouds is staying true to this angle. That's all I'm trying to do with this. And like this, I'm going to pick up just a little ultramarine. Again, I have not put any slow dry medium in this yet, so I'm gonna, this gets a little bluer there at the bottom. I just dipped into a little ultramarine. Trying to keep this kind of organic. I want to keep these shapes loose and like clouds, right? I can see I'm going to have to mix some more paints. It gets real dark out through here. There's kind of a curve and kind of a curve right here, darker and bluer. I think this next pile of paint that I mixed for the clouds, I'm going to go ahead and add a slow dry medium. I think that would help us. I say that, you know, but I think we're probably gonna just go back and do another coat. Maybe that'll be the place where I'll do the slow dry medium on second thought. I don't mean to be wishy-washy with you. I'm talking out loud. This is just, you're just kind of hearing my thought process. I hope it's not a scary thing. Let's see. I'm going to need a lot more paint here, so let me stop this for a second and I'm going to just mix some more paint. So as I've mixed a new pile of paint, I just added more white and more dark just to give me a little variety to work with. So I might just hold on to this and come over here, and so we've got some real dark. Well, that doesn't look dark enough, does it? I hear the dogs starting to come in. So this is looking a little purple. I'm going to add a little burnt sienna to kind of knock that back a little bit, gray it down a little bit. So I don't have a line. I've got a line here, but I know the next one would be about in here, and there's still some clouds there. They're actually bluer and darker, but that's okay. I think these are pretty colors, and I like that that's a little warmer up in here. So I'm just loosely brushing this in, not trying to overthink that. You know, these shadows get real kind of wispy and they vary a lot, and that's too light. Okay, I messed that one up. I just got that way too light. So let's put a little of this ultramarine and cerulean and white in, and let's see if we like that. I think it could be a little darker. I'm going to add a little more ultramarine to that. I think that's better. And I'm just loosely, you can see I'm turning my brush. I'm not overthinking this. I'm not worried about, oh my gosh, is that the same as the photograph? At this point, I really don't care. I'm just trying to get this kind of blocked in, and then we'll get back and see. And you notice I'm using the lighter pile down at the bottom. I'm going to darken it a little bit more for the top up here. Gosh, that's pretty. I'm kind of bad about not putting that bracket on the top of my canvas. I have never liked that for some reason. It feels very restrictive to me. And if you'll notice, I've got different, I'm picking up, the paint on my palette is not super mixed. They're just various piles. I didn't stir it like cake batter trying to make it all one solid color. And as a result, I'm getting different shades of blue up here, which I think is pretty. I think that keeps it a little looser and more vibrant looking. That's just me. You do you, but that's how I like to do it. And again, I'm kind of running out. I dropped a little bit more of the cerulean back in because I didn't want it to get too purple with the ultramarine. And that looks pretty purple, doesn't it? My brush is dragging, so that's a sign that it's either I don't have enough paint on it or I don't have enough water on it. So sometimes you just have to, I added some more water to it. So again, I'm trying to keep it darker at the top. And then we'll go lighter as we go down. This is where it is nice to have a slow dry medium in it. And I think I'm going to start adding that to my paint. So I use this Golden Open slow dry medium. I think they're all pretty much the same, but I really like this little twist cap where you can add a drop to your paint, or you can put some over to the side on your palette and just scoop up a little bit. So I'm just going to dip my brush in a little of this before I go into my paint and see if I can extend the life of this a little bit. So I don't think I want to get much darker. Let's see, we can, of course it's pretty thin, so if I hold this, it's going to run down. But if you'll notice, I'm slightly lighter at this stage than I am at the very top. And again, we're just trying to kind of get it blocked in. Don't overthink it. You know, this has just been my personal experience. You can always tighten up a painting, But once you start becoming a tight painter, it is awfully difficult to loosen it back up. So I'm trying to encourage you, if you like my style, and you may not, but I'm assuming you do, or you wouldn't be watching this video. There's a little burnt sienna I picked up in there, that's okay. I'm just trying to encourage you, use big brushes, use big strokes. If you don't, you're going to end up with just a tight painting. And it's just so hard to get over that. I'm having to mix a little more paint here. When I speed up my video for you, I have to take the sound out, otherwise I sound like Mickey Mouse talking really, really fast. So I may have to speed up some of this for you. I don't want to bore you, but this is just, I'm adding a little more white to our pile as we go down. Now I've jumped a lot right in here. Okay, here's where we are so far, and even though this is just kind of a rough block in, see that beautiful sense of perspective with the clouds. As I build those clouds up, I've got them on the right angles. It's going to read like they're coming towards you. I just love it. I think there's a great sense of perspective in the front with those shrubs coming. I do want to rework these hills a lot. I don't like this three humps. I think that looks odd. I'm going to extend this front hill and bring it down and reshape those a little bit. But I think we are well on our way. I like the color palette a lot. I think all that's playing very nicely together. So I think next we'll block in the front of the painting, and then we'll go back in and add our slow dry medium and do that beautiful second coat that's going to just bring it to life. So I'm starting to put in the greens, and again, I'm very mindful of color harmony. I want to stay within these same colors that I've already used. So I mixed some of the cerulean blue. I took a little bit of the cad yellow medium, and I took the tiniest touch of that cad red medium just to neutralize it just slightly. So that's this color. And I think that's reading very nicely. As it comes forward, I can add a little more yellow to it and let it be a little brighter. But, you know, in the photograph, this area of the field is really, really bright. And I don't know that I want to get it that bright. I really love what's happening with the sky. These colors are just so yummy. But, you know, let's see. So here's this little road that goes back. I need to fill that in with that same green, and then we'll mix our next green. I just wanted to kind of test that and see if I like that before I got too invested in it. Once we get to here, this is where it starts. It's about the same right here, and then when it gets into the cornfield, it gets a lot brighter. So I'm just taking a little of the cerulean blue, a little of that yellow. It doesn't take much, and you see how vibrant that is. That just doesn't look natural at all. I'm going to just use the corner of my brush, take a little bit of that cad red, and it's amazing. And I just add it just the tiniest touch at a time because it doesn't take much to overpower it. So let me fill in this section. Large canvas for you to be able to see it and me not be in front of it. So hopefully all that's working. All right, let me go ahead and put in these trees. These trees are going to be a little bluer than this tree, but I'm still going to use some of my sap green. I'm going to add some ultramarine to it and maybe just lighten it just a touch. Sorry, and a touch of white. I'm going to take the corner of my brush. I'm going to hold my brush very loosely. So that's really bluer and lighter than it is in the photograph. Let me get back and see how that's reading. I do want those trees to look like they're pushed back and not competing with these trees. And I think it does. Even though they could be a little greener, I think the fact that it's so blue gives a nice distance. So I'm going to try to get an interesting shape. You notice I'm still using a very big brush. I'm not dropping down to a little brush. I'm using big strokes. Need to get enough paint on your brush. Not overthinking it. It gets a little bigger there, a little lower there. Loose, 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 loose. I have to mix a little more paint. Getting enough paint on your brush is another great way to keep things a little looser. Otherwise, there's that tendency to want to scrub and dab, and because you're trying to get things off of your brush. I like using a flat brush for just about everything. You may rather use something rounder for these treetops. That's just, I've just kind of gotten used to this. There were some little bitty trees in the very back, so I'm going to use the same mixture but with just a tiny bit more white to it. And I'm going to make the trees a little smaller back in there. So you just get the sense they're pushed back farther. And that is actually a field in the photograph. But I don't know that I want our eye to go off the canvas there. So I may just add in a few more of these kind of lighter trees back in here and then have the darker trees in front. I just don't think I want that to become a focal point. So let me get back to my darker tree in front of that. Make it just a little darker so there's a little more distinction. There we go. Not overthinking it. When we go back and do our second coat and kind of fine tune this, I'm going to put some darks in the bases of these trees and then some light at the top just to make these look a little more three-dimensional. But right now I'm just trying to get some basic shapes in. One thing I'm going to go ahead and put in so I don't lose my drawing, and I am going to drop down to this little round brush, which is what I use to get the drawing in. I'm going to put in these darker lines just so I don't lose sight of that. And these lines, they're kind of like how the sky has a focal point. These lines need to start going out at a little bit of an angle at a certain point. There needs to be a point here where they're kind of straight on. Do you see what I'm doing? But as it moves out, it's going to be a little more of an angle. Don't overthink that. It's not that complicated. But you can see how that's going to give you a different perspective. I'm probably going to end up painting over a lot of that. That's okay. I just wanted to kind of get my road map in. So now we come to this big field that's just a ton of this bright green. So I'm going to use my cerulean my CAD yellow. I'm gonna use more yellow than I did before. Ooh, that's bright. Let's see how this looks without, wow, that's without any red in it. Woo! Let's see. Let me get back from that and just see if I can handle that or not. Well, it's pretty though. It really distinguishes it from the trees. Okay, let's go with that. I'm gonna mix a little dark into that mixture to kind of get this side area. This is where we're seeing the cornrows from the side. Let's see, get my lines right here. So this is the main. So I had to go back in and correct my drawing a little bit through this first row, because if I don't get that right, nothing else is going to read right. So I had to give my brain a time to adjust. But I've gotten in where this main corn row is going to be, then the next row. And the rest of this is basically just going to be green with a little texture here and there. So I don't want to bore you with putting all that in, but I'm just going to be staying with my same color palette. I went ahead and adjusted those hills in the back. I think that looks a lot prettier. So let me get in the greens of this field, and then we'll take a look at putting in some detail. So this is that all-important stage of what's working, what's not. One thing that I'm really struggling with, I didn't get my drawing in right, so I'm having to kind of rework that. I don't think this looks like a rut in the road. I've added this color to match that road. I'm going to do another rut in the same color, see if I can get this road to look a little better. I ended up putting posts to look like the end of the vineyard, the row of grapevines, but I think that gives you this abrupt ending at the front of the painting. The same thing with putting these darks in right here. So I'm going to take that back out. I'm just going to let it look more like an aerial view rather than looking at this straight on. I'm going to let it be. I'm having some trouble with that perspective. So I'm going to remove these as a way to not stop your eye and not confuse the perspective. Also, looking back at my photograph, these lines, this row lines up with the row down here, and right now they don't. They're at a different angle. So I'm going to adjust these. I'm going to leave this like it is, but right in here I'm going to adjust these a little bit more, and I might just take these out and not try to have those. Then I'll go ahead and put this back in. This is going to be a lot of space just to have this greenery, so I'm going to have to maybe add a little color in. This might be a place where I take that cad red and do something in here, but I just think that's going to be too big of a space not to do something, since there's so much detail every place else. So I'm going to make these adjustments, get the rest of the field in, and then it'll be time to go back in, finish these clouds, and do the second coat on everything and get a little more detail. But that's where I am, a very important stage. I really encourage you to always get back from your painting and just see what you like and what you don't. Most of this, I love this, love this, love this. And I really like this a lot. It's just right in here, the biggest part that's right up front. So let me work on these, and then we'll come back and do our second coat. All right, next I'm going to be putting in the tops of these clouds, and I will admit I'm kind of excited about it because I think that's really going to bring this to life. I'm a little nervous about it too. And I've been looking at the photograph, the reference photo, and there's not hardly any light. I've decided I'm not going to use this reddish pinky color in the sky. I like the color harmony so much like it is. I just don't think I'm going to introduce that. I might change my mind, but you'll notice these clouds don't have very light color tops. It's pretty dark all the way up. So I want to alter that a little bit. So, but I don't want to have this jumping out white fluffy cloud on top of this dark base. And I was hoping that maybe I could leave some of this without a second coat, but now that I'm up on it, I'm seeing all my pencil lines, I'm seeing canvas peeking out. So all this is going to have a second coat anyway, but I think I'm going to go ahead and get this top of the cloud in, and then I'll go back over and do the second coat with the shadows and with the sky. But I need that roadmap. And so what I've decided to do is I'm taking more white with the palette knife. Here's my pile of shadows for the clouds, the darkest, the middle, the lightest being right there. So I'm just going to make an even lighter pile, and it may be too light. I can pull a little more of that into it. This is paint from yesterday, but it's still fairly workable because I've got it on this Stay Wet palette. So let's see, that is looking very light. I'm going to add a little more. I'm just, you know, you can contaminate a big pile of paint pretty quickly by using too much dark. So that's why I add just a little bit of the dark at a time. And keep in mind with acrylics, your paint is going to dry a little darker than it appears when it's wet. So that's something to keep in mind. So I'm going to try to stay with a fairly big brush. I'm going to drop down a little bit. This is that same group of brushes, the Princeton Summit brushes. This is a size 8. And you know, you may prefer to use a round brush if you want to get, you know, the tops of the clouds really rounded. I think a flat brush helps have a more impressionistic look. That's just me. So I'm just going to try and get my face out of this for you. I'm going to, just looking at my reference photo, I put a big amount of paint on one side of my brush, and I'm just going to try to kind of lightly, it's thicker, it sticks up farther at some places, it comes down. I'm turning my brush. Down in here, it gets a whole lot lighter. I might even just dip into some white right in there. And you notice I'm holding the brush like this. I'm not clamped down on it like a pencil. So I don't have a lot of control over this brush. I'm turning it loosely. I'm just letting that paint kind of roll off and letting it kind of have some personality. I'm going to go back into the gray again. I'm going to go back into a little bit darker paint right in there. Try to vary this. I don't want this to be the exact same white all the way up. Let me get back and see how that's looking. I don't like how stick straight this is. Like, I like this cloud, even though it was on that line, it's got a different shape. I think these clouds look too much like a solid line. So I'm going to just kind of come off of that a little bit, just to break that up. Okay, getting back and looking at this, I really like these softer clouds more than these straight lines, and I think it's too dark for my taste. The clouds in the photograph are pretty dark, but I want to go up another value and get a much whiter. So I think before I do that, this is just my process. Sometimes I start working, I'm thinking, I don't know that I like the way this is working, so I'm going to switch gears. I think I'm going to go ahead and put my sky in again. So then when I put the final coat on the clouds, I can push it into that blue and I won't have to work the blue around it. So I don't want to bore you with that. I'm probably not going to film all that, but I'm just going to go back with my ultramarine blue and my cerulean blue and a little bit of white at the top. I'm going to get lighter until we get down to this cerulean blue and white, a lot of white here at the horizon. So let me get this sky, the second coat in, and then we'll come back and build up these clouds a little more. So here I've put another coat on that sky, and as you can see, I made it a little darker, and you can see places here where it's not super even. I did not put a slow dry medium in it, which makes it difficult with acrylic when you're working on a canvas this size. So it's not perfectly even, but I think I'm okay with it. I'm going to be adding, I painted out some of the clouds that were there, and then I'm going to go back and add them in. So some of these places where there's a noticeable mess up, I can put a little cloud in there to cover that up. So I think I am going to go whiter on these, on the tops of these clouds, and I think I'm going to leave this group of clouds more subdued with less detail, so that really looks pushed back, but I'm going to build this group up quite a bit and see if we can't get those looking a little more dramatic. Okay, going to work on this again. I've decided that I'm going to switch over to a Rosemary & Company Classic Long Flat. The edge of this is a lot softer than this sharp-edged flat that I've been using, and I think that's going to help me get a softer transition. I also wasn't crazy about some of the clouds in our photographs, so I've pulled up a couple of more cloud reference photos just to kind of look at to help me build these up. So I don't mean to go in front of you. So I'm taking a lot of white. I'm going into our gray. I'm pulling in a touch of that ultramarine. So I'm not sure I want to do pure white. And you know what? I'm going to use some slow dry medium at this point. As I go over these clouds again, I'm going to dip my brush. I'm just going to put a pile on the canvas, and I'm just going to dip my brush in that pile. It's kind of thin, so it'll run if I turn this upside down. So I'm just going to go back in to some of these grays. I'd like them to be a little more colorful, so I'm putting a little ultramarine blue back in, but I don't want it to disappear into the sky either, so it's got to stay gray enough. I want to have some dark spots and then some really light spots. Now with this slow dry medium, I'm going back into this lighter pile and my darker pile. I'm kind of making a middle value, and I'm just going to try this again. I'm going to use my brush like this, and I'm just going to turn it, see if I can just build this up a little bit. I really want the whitest part at the very top. And I don't mind this just going out of the top of the canvas. I'm just getting whiter, some whiter dollops here and there. I don't want to put it real white everywhere, just in certain little places. And again, every time I'm putting my brush down, I'm dipping into a little bit of that white. I'm turning my brush, I'm holding it very loosely. Just keeping that perspective in mind. We want to be true to that line, but we're not a slave to it. And I'm just working some dark back in. This slow dry medium helps so much. It's like working in oils. Isn't that pretty? I love this mingling. You can just drop that back in, these darks back in, and push it in pretty easily. I think it's easier for me to dip my brush in the slow dry medium than it is trying to keep that blended into all the piles. And I just want to have some places that are a little darker than others. Trying to keep these strokes loose. Just turning my brush, just kind of building that up a little bit. And if you'll use a little more pressure, a little less pressure, you'll get thicker places, you'll get wispy places. It's just, you know, and this is something you can practice before you put it on your painting, but it'll really help make it look more real. And I like these little break-off pieces too, where I'm just barely touching the canvas and let that just dance and skip a little bit. If it gets too thick, you can wipe your brush and kind of wipe it back off. So everything I'm using now has that slow dry medium in it. So I can work on this for a little bit and play with it. And it's just blending super softly. Just love it. I'm kind of glad I didn't do this at first because it enabled me to go back and get the sky in. If that sky was wet, or if I'd put the clouds in wet the first go round, I think I would be running into some problems right now. So I like not using it the first go round, particularly if you're going to be using going over a second time with a second coat. I think it's easier Wow. What a difference that makes. You can always skip past this if this is going too slow for you. It's kind of a push and pull. You work with it, you get back from it, see how it looks. But some people like to see every brush stroke, so I'm just trying to. So, and I don't want to use white all the way around every single cloud. I think it's nice to let it be thicker, like here it's wider, and then it gets super thin, and then it kind of disappears, and then it'll pop back up. That white will pop back up. I think it's good to put it in the middle of the cloud sometimes too. I love having some real whites against a dark blue sky. That just kind of makes my heart jump. Some of you may want something more subdued than that, and that's fine. I just love color, and I'm going to get back from this and see how this is reading. So as things come closer to you, of course it depends on the shape of the cloud, but typically that cloud is going to be getting bigger as it's coming towards you and smaller, thinner as it recedes. And what we have here is it's thinner and it's getting wider. So I don't like the looks of that. I can fix that by letting that dry and going back, cutting back in with the blue, which I may do. Or I could also build this up more through here. So I do want this area to be kind of dramatic. I do think I'm gonna build this area up a little bit more. And again, one of the lovely things with this acrylic, if you don't like it, if you don't get the paint too thick, you can always go back. And try to get an interesting outside shape. You don't want the clouds to look like lollipops or marshmallows. Get back from it plenty. That's very pretty. Notice I am continuing to hold this brush. I mean, you could blow on this about it and pull it out of my hand. I'm holding it so lightly right now. I don't like how this gets real wide. I think I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to cut into that a little bit with the sky. So I'm going to just move on to this next cloud. Turning my brush. I'm varying the amount of pressure I'm putting on there. You can also, within the cloud, do some of this kind of circular motion, leave some of that first coat, or just add in some more to get that a little more billowy within the cloud if you want. There are just so many ways to do clouds. And clouds are very forgiving. If it's not just right, probably nobody's going to notice. I love that. You can hear me scrubbing. I'm just putting that very wispy light. I'm still mindful of the direction that we're going in. I'm not doing a completely different thing. I'd love your thoughts in the comments. If this is helpful, if you've got a way that you do clouds that's easier, or so I'm going back into my darkest dark. It doesn't, whoops, there it goes. I got so much on my brush of that dark. I'm going to pull that off, and I'm going to just go back in to my lighter shades. And again, I'm just using the side of my brush, and I'm just going to lightly kind of scrub back into that, soften that up. Turning that brush, leaving some places thicker and whiter than others. I think that's really pretty. Have fun with it. To me, this is one of the most fun things about painting, is doing clouds like this. It's amazing the results you can get. Just going back into a little more white. So it's also nice to overlap clouds, again, to give you that sense that, because right now everybody's kind of lined up, I would like these to overlap a little bit. So I think I'm going to put this cloud in front of this one, and I'm going to do it by pulling down that white edge in front of this cloud that's behind it. And all of a sudden, you've got something that looks a lot more dimensional. And just again, to show that this is behind it, I think I'm going to go back in with this dark and let you see that this cloud is behind that. Just emphasizing that a little bit more. I think sometimes these little break-off pieces, to connect them to the cloud, is also nice. It would be hard at this point, like, I'm not crazy about that. It would be hard at this point to take my blue, because I don't have any saved and I didn't put any slow dry medium in it. Had I done some different piles and put slow dry medium in it, I could have gone back and corrected that. But at this point, that's going to be kind of tricky to do. So just, there's a thought. You might want to save some of your cloud or your sky color before you do this. So I'm going to probably quit filming for a little bit. I'm going to get back from it, and I'm just going to continue to build these clouds up. They're going to get flatter. So clouds are more billowy the closer they are to you. As they go in the distance, they're going to get flatter to where down here they'll be almost like a pencil. So these are not going to be built up as much, again, to give that illusion. So let me work on these a little bit and I'll let you see. So let you see where I am now. Using this softer brush was definitely the right move. It has really helped me get these softer edges. I ended up joining these clouds together a little bit. I didn't like they were so separated, and I might do that a little bit more just to kind of connect these a little bit. There was that straight line. I think I'm going to leave it. It almost looks like an airplane contrail. So I haven't done these on the right, but again, I'm going to keep them real minimum, but wanted you to see how this is looking. I'm really pleased with it. I think this one still looks a little odd, maybe needs some softening on that bottom, and maybe to make it even larger right through here. Again, I wish I had some blue piles that I could go back in and correct, but I don't, so let me continue working. So these don't have any slow dry medium on them yet. So again, I'm keeping these pretty flat. You can hear, I'm just very lightly scrubbing this. I don't have a lot of paint on the brush. I'm just kind of trying to go over this. I don't want to make a big statement out of these because I want them to recede, and I'm being real careful as I go back in and dip into my paints that I'm getting some slow dry medium on there. If you've never tried the slow dry medium, I really encourage you. It's just a completely different painting experience with acrylics. And you can I'm just pushing that dark. Again, I've got this really worn brush that's very soft. There's no hard edges here. I'm just very lightly scrubbing that in, and it just gives these beautiful blends of color. Might even connect these two a little bit here, overlap them a little bit. Put something in the middle right here just so that doesn't look so odd. Do I like that? I'm not sure I do like that. I might take that back out. I'm just dip my brush in the medium, and I'm going back to a little lighter color now, and again, just very lightly. And so you can see it leaves some little whiter, thicker dollops here and there. I think that's very pretty and organic. I'm not trying to overly control that. I'm letting the brush kind of do what the brush does, which can be so beautiful. And of course, as I'm pushing into this darker paint, they're blending a little bit like they would if I was painting in oils. This was getting a little too pointed. And just trying to kind of get a that's really getting a little more voluminous than what I wanted. Let me get back and look at that. I guess that's okay. I think it needs to have some whiter there. Up in this area. And just turning that brush, holding it very, very lightly. I would feel better about things if I had some blue sky that I could go back in and correct things. And you know, if you just really mess something up, you can always go back in and do that. Just make up some more blue. Just pushing some gray back up into that. Felt like it got a little too light. And as you push that gray up into the light, it kind of dilutes it, softens it. I'm liking these lighter grays better than where I started with these super dark grays. I like the white being pushed into that. I think that's prettier and softer. I'm not crazy about this shape. It reminds me of a, you know, one of those tools where you take a lid off or something, or a can opener. So let me get back and see. Yeah, I'm not liking the shape of that at all. So I'm gonna have to, I might live with that for a minute. I need to think about it. Well, I ended up, I'm just combining those two clouds. I just didn't like the way they looked, and so there's that. I feel like I don't really like this cloud. I feel like it's calling your attention to this upper right hand corner. I might even potentially paint it out. I don't know. Sometimes when I've been working on an area of a painting for a long time, I just need to take a walk or go eat lunch or something and get a break from it. And I think that's really what I need to do at this point. I think I'm just kind of messing with it because I don't know what else to do to it. I need to just walk away from it and come back in and get a fresh look. So, break time. Okay, so this is a bit of hold your breath time. So I have mixed a dark medium and that greenish color for the sky. I've included slow dry medium in it, and I've remixed my shadow colors. I do not have that color, which is just adding a touch more of the burnt sienna to a pile, so I'll keep that in mind. But so I'm going to go in and carve out, break these clouds up a little bit, and just reshape these. Don't like that one at all. Not crazy about that one. So I'm just going to see what I can do with these colors. Hopefully I'm going to have a little more time to work on it. So I'm going to go back to my flat brush. I'm going to go back into this darkest one. You know, sometimes just the negative shapes, you can end up with some pretty things. I'm kind of liking how that looks. That could be a little break-off piece. I don't object to that. I think I'm gonna life with dogs. I'm gonna go back into this dark again. You know, we can always go back over it with a little thin layer, but oops, I wasn't in the darkest pile. Here's the darkest pile. That's pretty, isn't it? While I'm here, I'm going to see if I can get rid of that streak. I must say I do feel a lot more secure having these different piles and knowing that I've got a slow dry medium in them, and maybe I can get this thing looking a little bit better. I love the silhouette of that. We can always go back in and add a little more of the wispies. I might go ahead and just, we can always reconnect it if that's too much, but it's kind of pretty, isn't it? Maybe cut into that one a little bit, give it a little more interesting shape. Let me get back from it. Now I'm going to go into this middle blue. I don't want this one being so straight, so I'm just kind of cutting up, giving it a little more shape there. And I'm going to break it right there. Again, I'm with our middle blue. Let me get back again. I can always go back in and make that bigger. If I don't like the shape of this, I can go back over it with the white, but I just trying to get a more interesting. And now that I'm seeing this one so blurry, this one looks, I think we need to add some sharper edges to others or make that one a little blurrier. And again, I'm just going to kind of carve out with our dark a few more shapes to get this a little more interesting. And that's too dark of a blue. That should have been my middle value, so be careful about that or it won't read correctly. Gosh, that looks so much better. I'm gonna clean my brush a little bit. And I'm gonna go into this green that we have for the bottom, and it may be too green. Let me get back. It's pretty having a little bit of that green up in the sky since you've got in the field. Let me add a little more cerulean to it and a little more white. And oops, see if we can just shift that. I'm going to pull some out of that pile. I'm going to add a little more of the cerulean to it. Shift it slightly more blue, and I'm going to go a little lighter with it. And let's just see if that makes much of a difference. So I really like how the clouds at the left are looking. Over here on the right, this area is where I put in the second coat of the blue yesterday. And these clouds that were there, if you recall those, some of them had the slow dry medium. So they just sort of blended in a little too much. So I think this area looks pretty rough. And as much as I hate to do it, I think I'm going to paint that blue area one more time. I'm not going to use a slow dry medium. Because I'd like to finish up, well, actually, I might use a slow dry medium and then finish doing the clouds tomorrow. I'll put the sky in with the slow dry medium, and then I can work down in the field today. So I hate doing that, but I really love this painting, but that is a problem area, so I'm gonna fix it. I wanted to let you see the sky now that I've reworked it a little bit. I'm much happier with it. I used my Rosemary & Company Classic Long Flat, which has a very soft, worn end to it, and I went back in and broke up some of these bigger clouds by just dropping blue in. And because this brush is so worn, I just scrubbed into the canvas a lot. These places are where I had almost no paint left on my brush, and I just scrubbed it and let the paint come off the brush. I did the same thing down in here, so it leaves you with this super thin, wispy sense of clouds. I added these little small break-off clouds, again, keeping that angle in mind. And once I did those, then I went back and I added a little bit thicker dollops of white, just to give you the sense that some parts of these clouds are more dense than others. And then as it trails off, I've got some real wispies there at the bottom, keeping in mind that as clouds are further in the distance, they're flatter. So the ones close to you are fuller and have more form, and then they get flatter. I may end up adding a few more, but I don't want to fill the sky. I wanted this to be the focal point. I think there's beautiful light in there. Some of that is with the that touch of burnt sienna is where you're getting that glow. And I did go back in with my palest blue and white mixture, and I added more white where it was almost pure white but not quite. And so I just built up the light around the edges of that built up the edges of those clouds until I was satisfied that that was giving me the light that I wanted. So I'm very happy with that. I think I need to just stop on the clouds. I'm going to go back in and work a little more. This was just the block-in stage of these shrubs. I like these. I don't want to overwork them, but I think I need to get this more in shadow and get a little more highlights at the top. So you, like this is a separate shrub from this, but they look like one piece. I want to distinguish that. On this road, as the road itself should be getting wider as it comes closer to the viewer, so the green in the middle should be as well. You notice it's more narrow here than it is here. So I may just kind of paint that out, just get my road in, and then put the green in the middle. So that definitely needs some work. And then I'll get over into that field area. I am so much happier with these shrubs. I think they look a lot more believable, and I like the light shining on. So I have this base for the road put in, and I'm not sure I'm going to put that green back in. I feel like that's one more green stripy thing. We've got so much of that going, but I think I'm just going to add a lot of browns and reds and kind of mess this up and make it look a little more rustic. And I think this space, even though in the photograph this was just dirt, I think it looks a little too wide. So I might put just the impression of some shrubs, something shorter going on down here. I'm going to keep it real subtle and dark. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So this video is getting so incredibly long, I felt like I needed to start just photographing and narrating for you rather than trying to videotape the entire rest of the painting. But here is that road where I've just blocked it out again. And then I went in and added some burnt sienna and burnt umber to it and just kind of lightly scrubbed that in. And I put some ultramarine blue. I added that to the far right side, so you got the sense that the road was in shadow from the vegetation. And then I went in and added a little bit of Naples yellow on top of that in spots to show where the sun was hitting it. So I thought the overall effect ended up looking great from where we started. So in between the rows, I did basically the same thing as we did out on the road, in the sense that I had a dark shadow, a medium color, and highlights. But instead of the ultramarine blue, I used burnt umber, that a real dark brown, to go underneath the foliage. Burnt sienna was the main reddish color, and then I used a touch of Naples yellow just in spots to highlight. I was concerned about the right side of that field just be looking too boring and having too much just kind of blank space. And you'll notice to the far right, I started out with a base of that cerulean blue with a little bit of yellow to get a dark undercoat, and then I went on top of that with lighter greens and whites, just kind of flicking using the corner of my brush just to establish some texture there at the front of the canvas. I thought that turned out really well. It's very subtle, nothing dramatic, but it took care of putting in some texture. Once I moved past the front of the field, I let the texture completely drop out, and it's just blocks of color in the back of the canvas. But that really helped give a sense of distance. Then you'll notice the tree line where I went back in and added some darks at the base of the trees and some highlights at the top just to give that more form. So here we have the finished painting. I am so pleased with this. I love the color. I love the design of it. The reference photo I think was great. I love that cerulean blue, and look at the sky. I know that got a little tedious reworking those clouds, and I apologize for that, but that's really my process. If I put something in and don't like it, I'll rework it until I do like it. And I think the clouds are just beautiful and soft and very believable. I love those distant hills that just fade away. I love the distinction between the different fields. You really get the sense of distance, that little bit of texture in that front field, all the light and drama and dark in the front. I just love it. I hope this has been a good experience for you. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'd love for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll get the next free video that's coming out soon. Thank you, and God bless.